Two elite cave divers are trapped deep inside a cave system, surrounded by toxic gas. It's a matter of life and death. Their partner has taken their only remaining tanks and gone for help. Now he waits alone in the darkness. Will he live or die? This is the story of the Sapakeda cave diving incident in Spain. Sapakeda is not a single isolated cave. It connects with several surrounding caves through underwater passages, linking them together. Together they form a vast underground labyrinth. The explored routes stretch over 3 kilometers. Inside, the cave is incredibly complex, with passages branching off in every direction. Finding your way relies entirely on a single numbered nylon guideline and markers and directional arrows left at each junction. Once you lose these clues, even the most experienced diver will struggle to find the way back. In April 2017, veteran diver Xisco and his friend Guillem arrived on the east coast of Mallorca to map the Sapakeda cave. For over 20 years, they had explored the underwater caves along this coastline countless times. They were more than used to these scientific missions. The tanks they carried contained enough air for the entire dive in and out, with a third of the supply kept in reserve for emergencies. They had also placed additional tanks 300 meters from the entrance. After entering the water, they followed the guideline and made good progress. They reached their destination without issue and split up to work in their respective areas. Xisco headed along a secondary line to another chamber to collect rock samples for dating back at the university. Guillem continued along the main line to explore new territory ahead, mapping the direction and layout of the passages. They thought this would be just another routine survey, but real trouble often hides behind the ordinary. The water in the cave doesn't flow. Over hundreds of years, sediment had built up into a thick layer of silt, 0.5 meter to 1.5 meters deep. Once disturbed, it can take days to settle again. Later that afternoon, after finishing their work, the two began their return journey. While squeezing through a narrow confined passage, they had to adjust their position, inevitably stirring up the silt on the bottom. The water turned murky almost instantly, but these two experts stayed calm. They continued moving steadily, keeping close to the guideline. If everything went according to plan, that's exactly when things went wrong. In a moment of concentration, Xisco suddenly felt his fingers close on nothing. The guideline had disappeared. He instinctively reached around, but there was nothing there. The rock anchoring the line had broken, causing the entire guideline to detach and sink into the darkness below. A chill ran through both men. They frantically searched along the walls and sediment, but every movement of their hands stirred up more silt. Visibility dropped lower and lower. Before they realized it, more than an hour had passed. Not only had they failed to find the guideline, they had also become completely disoriented in the murky water. Even worse, their air supply was nearly exhausted. They had only about 40 minutes left. Even if they found the guideline now, it would take them at least an hour to reach the exit. Faced with a situation that seemed hopeless, Xisco, who had explored these caves for years, remembered there was an air pocket nearby. In simple terms, it was a chamber not fully flooded with water, a large pocket of air trapped inside the rock. After steadying his breathing, Xisco relied on his incredible memory and led Guillem through a narrow passage. More than 10 minutes later, they reached it. They had found the air pocket, roughly 100 meters long and 40 meters wide, about the size of half a football pitch. There was no time to celebrate. As soon as Xisco removed his regulator, his expression changed completely. The air pocket had no ventilation with the outside world, and the carbon dioxide concentration was over 5%, more than 100 times higher than normal air. To put it plainly, this was not a refuge. It was a gas chamber that would slowly suffocate them. But true experts don't wait for the environment to improve. They focus only on solving the problem. The two men spread out their waterproof map and thought hard. Since the original route was blocked by silt and the Lost Line, they would have to take an alternative route back to the entrance. The problem was that this backup route was much longer and had no guideline. The most critical problem was that their remaining air wasn't enough for both of them to make it out. In this life or death moment, Zizko paused for a few seconds and decided to give all the tanks to Gillum. He would send him out alone to get help, while he stayed behind and waited. Gillum was smaller and slimmer, so he could move faster and consume less air in the tight passages. Zizko, with years of experience working in polluted caves, knew how to breathe slowly and calmly to minimize toxic gas intake. There were no arguments, no dramatic goodbyes. At 6 p.m., Gillum took their last remaining tanks and dove back into the water. Left alone in the darkness, Zizko barely moved at all, except to drink water or urinate. In this toxic air, every deep breath was pushing him closer to death. Thanks to his high-quality dresssuit, he managed to preserve some body heat. In the cold, damp darkness, as carbon dioxide slowly poisoned his body, his temples throbbed with sharp pain. His heart raced faster and faster. It felt like a heavy stone was crushing his chest. In Zizko's own words, he realized he was being buried alive bit by bit. Meanwhile, Gillum had to navigate a complex backup route, filled with branching passages and no guideline. He had to rely entirely on memory in total darkness. Yet he managed to reach the exit in just 30 minutes. He surfaced and immediately called the island's cave rescue team with shaking hands. Within an hour, the island's best cave divers arrived on site and launched the rescue operation. But the passages were filled with silt, making the markers impossible to see. No one could advance more than 300 meters. Continuing would not save a life. It would only risk more. To give the silt time to settle, the team had to suspend the search. The next day, police, firefighters, and volunteers arrived, even bringing heavy machinery, to try drilling a shaft from the surface to deliver food and fresh air. But after a full day of drilling, they achieved nothing. The rock layer was too thick, and the air pocket's exact location was unknown. No one could guarantee the drill would hit the right spot. Worse still, drilling risked causing a collapse. That would bury Zizko forever. As the long wait continued, Zizko's mind began to cloud. He started hallucinating. When he realized he was on the verge of death, in unbearable agony, he reached for the diving knife in his bag to end his suffering. Suddenly, the faces of his two children flashed through his mind. He pictured his mother, busy in the kitchen. Slowly, he lowered the knife and leaned back against the cold rock wall. In the darkness, he told himself, just one more minute. On the third day, although the water had started to clear, multiple rescue attempts still failed. Finally, team leader Burnett took charge personally. They placed markers every 50 meters, and after an hour, finally reached Zizko, who was on the brink of collapse. At first, he thought it was another hallucination. Only after a long moment did he recognize his old friends. The first thing he said when he realized he was saved was, "Did Gillum make it out?" Only after learning his friend was safe did he accept the glucose and oxygen. At 11:30 p.m., regaining his strength with the rescue team's help, Zizko swam out of the cave and reached the surface alive. Gillum stood in the crowd, eyes filled with tears, and shared a knowing smile with his friend. Zizko was rushed to the hospital that night for treatment, bringing an end to the 60-hour battle for survival. Later, Zizko gave the air pocket a name, the Chamber of Three Miracles. The first miracle was that in his darkest hour, he found a chamber with air. The second miracle was that after breathing so much deadly carbon dioxide, he was still alive. And the third miracle was that he ultimately walked out of there alive to tell the world what happened. To others, it was just another empty cavity deep in the cave. But to Xisco, it was the place of his rebirth, and a testament to the life and death bond he shared with Gillum.